Environmental racism is a component of environmental justice, and environmental justice, I have the definition memorized actually. It's the one by the EPA, and it's the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with the respect and development and implementation of environmental law and policy. So part in there though that talks about color and national origin, basically talking about race, and the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all these people, regardless of these things. Basically, environmental racism is when we don't do that when we're talking about somebody's race.
Black and brown communities in our country are forced to bear a disproportionate environmental burden. And with that environmental burden comes health harms, economic disparities, all sorts of things that communities of color have to bear because pollution is present in their communities at a much higher rate than anywhere else in the country.
Especially in my community, the most clearest example that I've thought of lately, modern-wise, that has like a tangible visualization of it is AB 617, Assembly Bill 617, which is the air quality bill. And so when that bill was making the rounds, people didn't know what it was going to do. And what it did is to make it happen, they were doing studies around the air of the entire state. And here in LA County, if you look at where the most toxic air is, the number one priority areas in LA County were Boyle Heights, East LA, and West Commerce, and Wilmington, West Long Beach, and Carson. And if you know the areas, then you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense, because Boyle Heights, East LA, and West Commerce are around the East LA interchange, where over 40,000 trucks pass daily. And Carson, West Long Beach, and Wilmington are right where all the incinerators are.
East Los Angeles and Southeast Los Angeles are the first places that come to mind. They are what was historically known as the Spaghetti Bowl, and that is because of the varying and multitude of freeways that kind of divide up the area. There are 7 different freeways that cut across East Los Angeles. 50% of the city of Boyle Heights, the land coverage is freeways, and it is commonly known or researched that studied that people who live within 100 to 300 feet of a freeway or highway tend to have a lot more respiratory issues. So that's what the communities in East LA and Southeast LA are facing primarily, along with the fact that they are also suffering from a very, very massive lack of tree coverage, and trees are the filters of the air, So if we have the highways that are providing all of this air pollution to a specific community, and then also no trees to clear that out, that creates for a really big impact on the people and their health.
Ports are a big problem in terms of emissions coming off of ships and cargo handling equipment at the port. But in addition to ships and cargo handling equipment, all of the trucks that carry goods back and forth from the port to warehouses, where all of the RTVs and cars are sitting waiting to be distributed to the Best Buy or delivered to our front doors, all of those trucks go directly through our communities and spew pollution into the air. And that is a huge problem as we continue to expand in this area in Southern California, build more freeways, expand existing freeways. We have to be really careful that we're actually taking into account and considering the emissions that are increasing as a result of that expansion.
LA isn't very well regarded in terms of air quality, right? It's often quite bad. And you can say that for the entire county, but the way that LA is laid out, there are, valleys and basins, and air doesn't really move. So the intensity of the air pollution is a lot higher in certain areas. And the deciding factor of who lives in those areas is, racial demographics. You can talk about decades of redlining, these efforts to separate people and where they live. And that you can see the effects of that today in terms of who's breathing what air, basically.
I went to college at Cal State Northridge for my undergrad. And my first year of college, I realized the impact of the air that I was breathing, because I became, once I got into the valley, because of how the valley is set up, is like a bowl. So the air just kind of sits on top. And I started having breathing issues because of the quality of air at that time.
When it comes to environmental racism, it's a lot deeper than just we want to save trees and save the animals. It is about how people's everyday lives are affected. The pollution that people in Inglewood and Compton face, the majority of it is not produced in Inglewood, Compton, South Central. The pollution that is drifted here and brought here is from wealthier neighborhoods and cities bringing or more of the better word would be dumping their waste here, because there's not as much political power, there's not as much economic power for people to push back against that.
The 710 freeway was supposed to expand all the way up north, but the community of Pasadena had so much money and influence, they were able to stop the building of the northern expansion of the 710. But what's happening on the southern part, they're expanding it, displacing families and businesses that, are run by communities of color.
Environmental racism is part of systemic racism. The reason why these companies' facilities are sited in Black communities of color, the reason why it's happening is because our systems and structures allow it to happen, because decades and decades of racism have put in place systems where our local governments, our state governments and federal governments allow for disproportionate industrial facilities in communities of color. It still is not fair that Black and brown communities are suffering from pollution, from asthma and cancer and other conditions that other people don't even have to worry about at all, because they have the political capital to say no.
We started with the trash-free lunch, and we also had a garden on our campus as well. And so we incorporated the composting piece of the trash-free lunch into our garden program. They took charge of how their campus looked. It wasn't just solely left up to the custodian. They took ownership of that. And then with the garden, they enjoyed it, being a part of watching something grow and learning about the different fruits and vegetables, and just being a part of that process. They really enjoyed it. I think it's important to explain to children their impact on the environment and where they live. And so, getting back with the trash-free lunch, the trash doesn't get there by itself. Someone has to throw it down there and leave it. So if they know not to do that, and if that's a collective thing where everyone knows if we don't drop our trash on the floor, we throw it in the trash can, that number one keeps our campus clean and our environment clean.
The education allows us to visualize that we can live in a place where we can breathe, where we can drink clean water, where we can plant in our gardens without worrying about what's in the soil, So it allows us to visualize those things through the education that you're receiving.
When it comes to the education aspect of what I do, I'll give you the breakdown of how I would do the unequal eco seminars, right? So first, it starts with basically a town hall. I have guiding questions about things that are kind of just general issues in our society. The second part of it is, before the seminar, I do research on a particular community and I compile statistics on the guiding questions I had asked. The third part is we have a dialogue. We see where do people's personal experiences match with the facts. The fourth part, I ask them just to provide a single solution for one of the topics that we talked about. The communities themselves come up with solutions that benefit their community. I send that to them and I'm like, hey, here are some practical things that you can do as a single mom, as a father of two, as a senior citizen, as a 16-year-old. Here are some things that you can do that can have a direct impact on your community.
the curriculum for environmental science is often just like talking about biospheres and animals and plants and soil, which is like important, yes, but shouldn't we also be talking about people in that context? And when we're talking about people, shouldn't we also be talking about the social, like I'm saying, like the environmental racism side of it, shouldn't that be included? I think a lot of the times these important topics are excluded from curriculum and also just common discourse as well.
I think as time progresses, more people care and they care harder. And I think even though the future might look bleak sometimes, we shouldn't fret because there are a lot more people who are coming in harder.
I think about how our youth are being more and more involved, made aware of these situations. If we're thinking about the world 10 years from now, what are we leaving for you all? What is going to be the legacy that we say that, we often throw that around, oh, I'm doing this for my kids, but what are we really leaving for you?
The reason why I would use the word powerful is because of the response that I see for young people. I feel like, and especially when I see students, as young as in, middle school and high school, who are putting together campaigns and movements to persuade adults who should know better to do better.
I see this field and this movement continuing to be a really important part of how we move forward in this country.